6 months ago, I thought I was marrying my best friend, the woman who knew my every flaw and still chose me. I didn't know she was also building a secret future with someone else, my actual best friend. I let the wedding day arrive without a single warning or fight. Because the gift I had prepared wasn't wrapped in paper. It was sealed in an envelope that would burn their perfect little world to the ground. Before everything collapsed, our life together felt stable. Not fairy tale perfect, but built on routines I thought were solid. We'd been engaged for nearly a year, planning the kind of wedding you only see in glossy magazines. Guest lists, catering, matching flowers. Every decision felt like a we decision. I thought I was part of her inner circle. And then there was Matt, my best friend since high school. He'd been by my side through every bad haircut, every failed relationship, every stupid decision. When I introduced him to my fiancée, it felt natural. They clicked, in the way my friends usually clicked with her. Polite, friendly, a little teasing at my expense. Nothing that set off alarms. But looking back, maybe the first red flag was how often she brought his name into conversations. At first, it was small things. Matt said this. Matt recommended that movie. Matt helped me pick the playlist for the reception. I told myself it was harmless. She was just being social, right? The thing about betrayal is that it never starts with a confession. It starts with tiny details that don't fit, moments you brush off because the alternative is too ugly to believe. Like the time I walked into the living room and found them laughing at something on her phone. The screen lit up just enough for me to see my name in a text, followed by a string of laughing emojis. I asked what was so funny, and they exchanged one of those glances that makes your stomach knot. She said it was nothing important, and Matt changed the subject before I could press. I let it go. I wanted to let it go. After all, wedding planning was stressful enough without me inventing problems. But a few weeks later, I overheard something that froze me in place. They were in the kitchen, voices low, but I caught one sentence clear as day. Once the honeymoon's over, we'll figure it out. Figure what out? I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, and realized something I didn't want to admit. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. Something was happening right under my nose, and the two people I trusted most were in on it together. That should have been my breaking point. Instead, it became the seed of a plan. A quiet, patient, razor-sharp plan that would unfold on the day they thought was the start of their forever. Little did they know, it would be, just not the forever they imagined. The first crack in the glass came on a Tuesday night, 2 months before the wedding. I'd just gotten home from work, the kind of day where you're running on autopilot. Shoes off, keys in the bowl, fridge door open before your bag even hits the floor. She was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with her phone tilted toward her, thumb scrolling fast. "Hey," I said, expecting her usual smile. Instead, she jumped slightly, locked her screen, and set the phone face down. That's the kind of detail you want to ignore, because if you acknowledge it, you're admitting something might be wrong. "Everything okay?" I asked. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just finalizing some stuff for the wedding. You know, the playlist." The playlist. Again. I'd heard about this playlist 3 times in the last week, always with Matt's name somehow attached. He was helping pick the songs, apparently because he had great taste. I shrugged it off and went to change, but the odd tension in the room followed me down the hallway. When I came back, she was gone. No goodbye, no I'll be back soon. Just an empty kitchen and her phone still sitting on the counter, unlocked this time. That should have been my first red flag, but curiosity is a slow-burning fuse. I didn't pick it up, didn't scroll through, didn't go full detective. Instead, I just glanced, enough to see Matt's name in the chat list, bolded with a new message. A part of me wanted to open it, but another part, the part still clinging to trust, told me I didn't need to. If there was something to worry about, it would show itself eventually. It didn't take long. A few nights later, we were at a small get-together with friends. The kind where people drift between the kitchen and living room, sipping wine, trading stories. I was mid-conversation when I caught sight of her across the room, talking to Matt. Not unusual, except for the way she was looking at him. It wasn't the look of someone chatting with her fiancé's best friend. It was softer, warmer, the kind of look you save for someone who already belongs to you. My stomach tightened. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was imagining things. But then she laughed, not her usual laugh, but that quiet, private kind that doesn't spill into the room. And just like that, the air around me changed. I couldn't focus on the conversation anymore. My brain was cataloging every interaction they'd had in the past few months, every inside joke, every harmless smile. Later, when I brought it up, she rolled her eyes. "You're being paranoid," she said. And then the line that lodged itself in my chest. "Matt's like family to me. You're the only one I want." I nodded, pretended to believe her. But that sentence, "you're the only one I want," felt less like reassurance and more like a test I was already failing. The thing about tests is, I like to study before I take them. And I was about to start studying very closely. But that was just the beginning of my nightmare. The shift from something feels off to I know something is wrong happened on a rainy Thursday night. She was in the shower when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble has a way of tapping you on the shoulder. The preview lit up the screen, and even without touching it, I saw enough. "Matt, we'll make it work. Just not yet." My chest tightened. My first thought was maybe it's about the wedding plans. But the second thought, the one that wouldn't shut up, was why would my best friend need to tell my fiancé we'll make it work? I didn't open the message. Not yet. I just sat there, listening to the hiss of the shower, feeling my pulse in my ears. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, she caught me glancing at her phone. "You okay?" she asked, her voice light. "Yeah, I lied. Just saw it light up. Thought it might be important." She didn't even look at it. Just slid it into her bag and changed the subject. That should have calmed me down. It didn't. Over the next week, I started noticing patterns. How she'd step out of the room when answering certain calls. How she'd tilt her phone away when Matt's name appeared. How their inside jokes had become exclusive, like I wasn't part of the audience anymore. One night, we were sitting on the couch, both scrolling through our phones in silence. She laughed suddenly, a short, breathy laugh, and locked her screen before I could see it. "What's funny?" I asked. "Oh, nothing. Just something Matt sent me," she said, almost too casually. I smiled back, but inside, I felt something sour spreading. That's when I started testing her. Small, calculated tests. I'd mention I was working late, and then show up at home early. I'd leave my phone charging in the kitchen while I was in another room, just to see if she'd text him more when she thought I wasn't watching. And she did. One evening, I walked into the living room earlier than she expected and caught a flash of their chat. No words this time, just a photo. I couldn't make out what it was, but her quick swipe to close it told me everything. My instincts screamed at me to confront her. But instincts are impatient, and I've learned that patience wins bigger games. So I played dumb. I laughed when she joked. I kissed her goodnight. I acted like the man she thought she was fooling. Because I knew that whatever was going on, they believed they were being careful. And people who think they're careful leave the biggest footprints. Then I found something that confirmed my worst fears. The proof didn't come in a dramatic burst. It slid in quietly, tucked between the lines of a conversation they never meant for me to see. It was a Saturday afternoon. She'd left her laptop open on the kitchen table, supposedly to stream a wedding playlist while she folded laundry in the other room. I was making coffee, not even thinking about snooping, when a notification popped up in the corner of her screen, a message preview from Matt. "Matt, after the honeymoon, we'll have time to figure out the living arrangements." I froze, mug halfway to the counter. Living arrangements? I clicked before I could stop myself. Her chat app opened, and there it was, an entire conversation laid out like a confession written in pixels. They weren't talking about our honeymoon. They were talking about their future, where she'd move, how they'd keep things quiet until the timing was right, how I was a safe choice for now because I'd take care of the bills, the wedding costs, and this part made my vision blur. Make it easier to transition without questions. I read line after line, each one hitting harder than the last. My fiancé and my best friend weren't just flirting. They were strategizing, building a life together on my dime, under my roof, in plain sight. I felt the coffee in my hand go cold. My mind split into two voices, one screaming, one ice calm. The screaming voice wanted to storm into the bedroom, throw the laptop on the bed, and demand every answer. The ice calm voice told me this wasn't the moment. Not yet. Because now, I didn't just suspect. I knew. And when you know, you can plan. I scrolled further back, my stomach twisting tighter with each message. "Matt, once the wedding's over, we can." Her, I know. I just want it to look normal for a while. Then we'll be free. Free. That word stuck in my head like a splinter. Free from me. Free to step into the life they'd been building in the shadows. I closed the laptop just as she walked back in, humming to herself. She looked at me, then at the untouched coffee pot. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about the toast for the reception." She smiled back, oblivious. Inside, something shifted. The hurt was still there, raw and electric, but beneath it was a new current, cold, sharp, and deliberate. I wasn't going to warn her. I wasn't going to confront Matt. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of scrambling to hide. Instead, I was going to let them walk into the wedding thinking they'd won. Because the best revenge isn't catching someone in the act. It's letting them believe they've gotten away with it. Right up until the moment you pull the floor out from under them. I wasn't ready for what I was about to discover next. I thought I'd seen the full picture. I thought the messages on her laptop were the whole betrayal in plain text. I was wrong. A week later, I was at Matt's place to help him move some furniture. At least, that's what he thought. In reality, I wanted to get a read on him face to face, to see if the guilt had left any cracks. But Matt was as smooth as ever, joking like nothing was wrong, offering me a beer like we were still the inseparable duo from high school. When he went to grab a toolbox from the garage, I noticed his tablet sitting on the coffee table. Unlocked. Screen still glowing from whatever he'd been looking at. I shouldn't have looked. But then again, they shouldn't have been doing this. One swipe, and I was staring at a shared folder, wedding documents, honeymoon bookings, and something else. A subfolder labeled Phase 2. My pulse spiked. I tapped it open. Inside were notes, actual typed-out plans, about how to transition assets smoothly. They were talking about my assets. Selling the condo after the wedding to avoid messy legal stuff, moving her into Matt's place once the dust settles, and, most infuriating of all, a list of my accounts. Not exact numbers, but close enough to know they'd been paying attention to things I never shared with anyone. Scrolling further, I found screenshots, conversations between the two of them mocking me. Matt, he's so focused on the wedding he doesn't even notice. Her, I know. I almost feel bad. Matt, don't. This is how we get to the good part. The good part. I closed the folder, my hands trembling, not from sadness this time, but from the sheer audacity of it all. This wasn't just emotional betrayal. This was a coordinated operation. When Matt came back into the room, I was leaning casually against the counter, beer in hand, like I hadn't just seen the blueprint for my own downfall. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, forcing an easy grin. "Just thinking about the bachelor party. Gonna be one for the books." He smirked, not realizing I was already rewriting the ending. Driving home that night, my thoughts crystallized. This wasn't about confronting them anymore. This was about setting the stage so perfectly that when the curtain fell, they wouldn't just be caught. They'd be trapped in their own spotlight, with everyone watching. If I'd ever doubted my ability to keep a straight face, those doubts were gone. Over the next few weeks, I smiled more, laughed more, even went out of my way to spend time with both of them. They probably thought I'd never been happier. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Because while they were building their Phase 2, I was building mine. This went so much deeper than I ever imagined. Once I knew the scope of their little operation, my world split into two timelines. There was the timeline they saw. The cheerful groom-to-be, busy finalizing wedding details, cracking jokes about how stressed I was, thanking them both for all their help. And then there was my real timeline. Every free moment spent designing a plan sharp enough to cut through their smug certainty. The first question I had to answer was when. The obvious choice was the wedding day, the peak of their confidence, when the audience was largest and the masks were most secure. But the how, that kept me awake at night. I wanted it clean. No screaming match, no physical scene that could be spun as me losing it. I wanted something undeniable, something that would strip them down to the truth in front of every friend, every family member, every person whose opinion mattered to them. For 2 weeks, I carried a small notebook in my jacket pocket, jotting down ideas in shorthand. Some were petty, too petty to waste this opportunity on. Others were clever, but lacked the punch I wanted. And then, one night, while lying in bed pretending to scroll through honeymoon packages, the idea arrived fully formed. An envelope. Inside, not money, not a letter, but printed copies of the Phase 2 folder from Matt's tablet, complete with timestamps, screenshots of their messages, and that one line I couldn't shake: "He's a safe choice for now." I could already picture it, handing it to them during the reception, maybe as part of a toast. Watching their faces as they realized what they were holding, with every eye in the room on them. The thought made me smile in the dark, but the smile faded quickly. Because in the quiet, doubts crept in. Was I ready to torch everything in one spectacular moment? Was I prepared for the fallout, the whispers, the questions, the inevitable attempts to twist the story? I thought about my parents, who'd paid deposits for the venue. About my siblings, who were flying in. About the friends who'd traveled just to see me happy. And then I thought about that line again. Once the wedding's over, we'll figure it out. No, they'd already made their choice. I was just deciding when to let them know they'd lost. Over the next month, I rehearsed my role. I practiced my smile in the mirror, making sure it reached my eyes. I trained myself to nod through their private jokes, to laugh at conversations I knew were laced with subtext. The hardest part was acting normal around Matt. Every instinct in me wanted to punch him square in the jaw, but I shook his hand instead, slapped him on the back, bought him a beer. Every time I did, I imagined the sound of paper tearing open at the reception and the silence that would follow. By the time the big day rolled around, I wasn't nervous about marrying her. I was electric with anticipation. I spent sleepless nights planning. Finally, I knew exactly what I had to do. The morning of the wedding, I woke before the alarm. No nerves, no jitters, just that strange calm you get when you've rehearsed something so many times it feels inevitable. The envelope was already in my suit jacket, sealed with a plain white sticker. Nothing flashy. If you didn't know better, you'd think it held a thank you card. At the venue, everything moved in a blur. Guests arriving, photographers snapping, the wedding coordinator buzzing around like a general before battle. She looked stunning when I saw her. I'll give her that. The kind of beauty that could make you forget why you were angry. Almost. Matt was there too, grinning like a man who'd won twice. He slapped my shoulder and said, "Today's your big day, man." The hypocrisy in his voice was so thick I almost laughed. During the ceremony, I played my part perfectly. Vows delivered without a crack in my voice. Rings exchanged without hesitation. Applause, photos, the kiss. If anyone looked closely, they might have noticed that my smile didn't linger after the camera clicked. The reception began, and I waited for my moment. The envelope weighed against my chest like a loaded weapon. I'd planned to give it to them during my speech. A simple handoff. Let them open it right there at the head table. Let the room react in real time. But then something happened I didn't expect. Between the first dance and the cake cutting, she pulled me aside. "I'm glad you didn't get cold feet," she said with a smile. "You're reliable. You'll make everything so much easier." There it was. Confirmation, wrapped in a compliment only she thought was flattering. The safe choice, the reliable one. The man who would make their little transition seamless. For a split second, I felt a flicker of doubt. Was this the moment? Should I just slip the envelope into her hand now, skip the public spectacle, and end it quietly? But no. Ending it quietly would mean they still had room to spin it. Public was the only language they understood. Dinner came and went. Glasses clinked for toasts. Laughter rolled across the tables. I stood when it was my turn, envelope in hand. The room went quiet. I started talking, thanking guests, telling a few light jokes about wedding planning disasters, the usual safe material. I could see her relax, thinking this was just a sweet moment in a long day. Then I paused. My hand slipped into my jacket pocket. I pulled out the envelope. "This," I said, holding it up, "is my gift to the two people who have worked hardest to make this wedding possible." I turned and placed it on the table between her and Matt. "Go ahead. Open it together." They exchanged a glance, confused, but still smiling. She tore the seal. Paper slid out. The smile died first on her face, then on his. The room stayed silent, waiting. And for a moment, I thought that was it, that the silence itself was my victory. I couldn't have been more wrong. For a few glorious seconds, I thought I'd nailed it. They sat there, frozen, eyes darting over the printed messages, the timestamps, the screenshots, the mocking lines they'd thought were private. Then the murmurs started. Guests leaning toward each other, whispering. Some craned their necks to see what was on the papers. Others just stared at me, waiting for the rest of the story. But before I could deliver the knockout blow, she looked up and smiled. "I don't know what this is supposed to prove," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "But it's obviously fake. Who even prints things anymore?" The words hit me harder than I expected. Matt chimed in, his voice full of manufactured disbelief. "Man, I don't know what you're trying to pull, but this isn't cool. You could have just talked to us." I felt the shift in the room. That dangerous middle ground where people aren't sure who to believe. A few guests frowned at me, others at them. The control I thought I had was slipping. She pushed the papers back toward me, shaking her head like a teacher disappointed in a student. This is your wedding day, and you're turning it into whatever this is. Maybe you're nervous. Maybe you're having doubts. But this is sad. My blood boiled, but I knew anger would only make me look worse. I needed to hold my ground without giving them a chance to play the victims. So I took a breath, picked up the papers, and said, if anyone here wants to know whether these are fake, you're welcome to compare them to the files on Matt's tablet or her laptop. I'm sure they'd be happy to hand them over right now. That got a reaction, a quick, sharp look between the two of them. It was small, but it was enough for some people to catch it. I saw a couple of my cousins exchange knowing glances. Then Matt's sister, bless her, stood up from her table. I've seen those screenshots before, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. They're real. The room tilted again. Eyes turned back to the head table. My fiancée's smile faltered, just for a second, before she launched into damage control. I don't know what she thinks she saw, but it's exactly what we're all looking at right now, Matt's sister interrupted. And just like that, the tide shifted. Guests started pulling out their phones, whispering to each other, some outright glaring at the two of them. The public spectacle I'd envisioned was back on track, but it had been closer to derailing than I ever wanted to admit. Inside, my pulse was still hammering. The plan had survived the hit, but it reminded me of something important. People caught in the act will fight like hell to rewrite the story in real time. The difference now was, I wasn't the only one holding the script. What happened next made me question everything I thought I knew about them. If Scene 7 felt like a battle, Scene 8 was the war they tried to win back. Within minutes of Matt's sister speaking up, my fiancée was on her feet. She didn't cry. She weaponized composure. I'm sorry everyone had to witness this, she said, voice steady, almost gentle. But I think it's clear my husband is struggling. Maybe from stress. Maybe from something deeper. We'll work through it privately. It was masterful. She wasn't denying outright now. She was reframing me as unstable, someone in need of sympathy, not truth. Matt played along instantly. We've been worried about him, he said, nodding at a few guests like they'd all had secret conversations about my supposed behavior. This isn't the first time he's imagined something like this. The worst part? Some people nodded back. They were buying it. For a moment, I felt the floor tilt under me. My own wedding reception, my own plan, and here I was, watching them flip it into a performance where I was the villain. My hands tightened around the papers. I wanted to shout, to lay every detail bare, to drag Matt's tablet into the room and open the folder right there. But part of me feared that the louder I got, the more I'd look like exactly what they were painting me as, unhinged. That was the lowest point. Not because I doubted what I knew, but because I could see the story slipping through my fingers. The humiliation wasn't in the betrayal anymore. It was in realizing they were still trying to control the narrative even with the evidence in front of everyone. And then, from somewhere near the back of the room, a voice cut through. Check the cloud. It was Matt's sister again, phone in hand. He's too stupid to turn off autosync. Everything's backed up. Head swiveled toward Matt. His face drained of color. My fiancée's hand shot out toward him, but it was too late. A couple of my friends were already crossing the room toward her. Someone called out, "Show us," and suddenly, half the guests had their phones out. Within seconds, the group chat was filling with screenshots pulled straight from the cloud account. Not just the ones I had printed, worse ones. Voice memos. Photos from nights they'd told me they were working late or visiting family. The air in the room changed. The sympathy she'd been trying to build evaporated. Conversations turned sharp, whispers cut through the music. People moved their chairs back from the head table. Matt tried to speak. This is out of context, but was drowned out by laughter, bitter and disbelieving. I just stood there, watching the whole structure they'd built collapse in real time. It was messy, louder than I'd planned, but in that mess, the truth had found its way out without me raising my voice once. Plus, I realized in that moment exactly what I had to do to end this once and for all. The room was already leaning my way, but I wanted the ending to be mine. Not theirs, not chaos, not whispers. Mine. I stepped forward, taking the mic back from the DJ. Since we're all here, I said, my voice steady but loud enough to cut through the noise. Let's clear a few things up before dessert. Silence fell. Phones were still in people's hands, some screens glowing with the very messages I'd printed, others with fresh screenshots streaming in from the cloud. I looked at her first. You once told me I was the safe choice. Reliable. Good for now. That's in here, in your own words. I tapped the papers. You also said, once the wedding's over, we'll be free. Free from what? From me? From the person you were planning to vow your life to in front of everyone. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't answer. Then I turned to Matt. And you, my best friend. The man I trusted to stand beside me today. You had an entire phase 2 mapped out for my home, my accounts, my life. You didn't even bother to hide the file name. Tell me, was it arrogance or just stupidity? He shifted in his seat, jaw tight, eyes darting to the floor. I let the pause stretch. The thing about being the safe choice, I said, scanning the room, is that safe doesn't mean weak. It means patient. It means I see more than you think. And it means I know exactly when to act. Then I did the one thing they couldn't spin. I reached into my pocket, pulled out 2 small velvet pouches, and set them on the table. Inside were the wedding rings. You can keep these, I said. Consider them my actual gift. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone near the front muttered, damn. I straightened up. You wanted a future together? Congratulations, you have it. You can leave here tonight as exactly what you've been pretending not to be. Without another word, I turned and handed the mic back. The DJ, to his credit, started playing music immediately, but the tension was too thick to dance to. Guests were already moving, some to comfort me, others to leave, a few to corner Matt and my now ex-fiancée with questions they clearly didn't want to answer. I walked toward the exit, my head high, the sound of whispered conversations and sharp accusations following me out. Just before I reached the door, I heard someone, maybe Matt's sister again, say, well, that's one wedding I'll never forget. Neither would they. Finally, justice served, and in front of everyone who mattered. In the days that followed, the story spread faster than I could have imagined. I didn't post anything online. I didn't need to. Guests had already shared enough photos, videos, and play-by-play accounts to make sure the truth reached every corner of our social circles. By Monday morning, mutual friends who hadn't been at the wedding were texting me variations of the same message. I can't believe they actually tried that. Others sent screenshots of group chats where my ex-fiancée and Matt were being roasted without mercy. I stayed quiet. No interviews, no long explanations, no defensive posts. Just silence, the kind that makes people lean in closer. Within a week, the fallout was in full swing. Matt's relationship with his own family fractured. His sister had been the one to break the dam, and she wasn't taking his calls. My ex-fiancée's parents, who had smiled politely at me during the engagement, actually called to apologize, not because they liked me, but because they were embarrassed. The venue refunded part of the deposit after hearing what went down. Apparently, the staff had been gossiping about it too. The part one didn't expect was the professional ripple effect. Matt lost a couple of freelance contracts after clients didn't like the optics. My ex-fiancée's side hustle, the one she was hoping to expand after our wedding, lost followers by the hundreds. Some of them even messaged me directly, saying they'd unfollowed her out of sheer disgust. And me? I slept better than I had in months. I won't lie, there were moments when the quiet felt strange. For so long, my energy had been focused on holding the plan together, keeping the mask on, waiting for the moment. Now there was nothing to wait for. No performance to maintain. Friends kept asking if I'd start dating again soon. I told them no. Not because I was broken, but because I'd learned something valuable. Patience isn't just about revenge. It's about letting yourself rebuild on your own terms. One evening, a buddy invited me to a small get-together. I almost said no, but went anyway. That's where I met Claire, not through a dating app, not through a setup, just by chance. We talked for hours, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to measure every word. We're not rushing into anything. But I'll say this, she knows the whole wedding story, and instead of pity, she gave me the kind of laugh that says, damn, I wish I'd seen that in person. As for Matt and my ex-fiancée, I hear they tried to make it work for a while. But when your relationship is born in betrayal, trust is just a ghost you keep chasing. Last I heard, they weren't speaking anymore. Sometimes, I think about that envelope. How small it was. How simple. And how it carried more weight than any shouting match or fistfight ever could. If there's one thing I took away from all of it, It's this: the right moment, handled the right way, will always echo louder than rage. And mine? Well, they'll never forget it. You know, looking back, it's almost funny how calm I felt walking out of that reception. Not because I wasn't hurt. I was. But because I'd finally taken the power back. And that's the thing I want you to take from this. You don't have to scream to be heard. And you don't have to break yourself to break the lie. Sometimes, the quietest move is the one they'll remember the loudest. If you've ever been the safe choice, the person someone thought they could use until something better came along, trust me, you're not alone. And if you've ever caught yourself wondering whether patience really pays off, well, you just heard my answer. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about refusing to let someone else write my ending. About making sure the truth stood in the center of the room where everyone could see it, and then walking away without looking back. If you stayed with me all the way to the end, thank you. I hope you'll share this story with someone who needs a reminder that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And hey, if you want more stories like this one, you know what to do.